What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Cosmic Campfire, where the fire is always warm, the seats are plenty, so gather around and let's talk about storytelling. Life in general is a learning experience, and you learn by what happens to you or what you do. And so the other day I was outside with the kids, and I pulled out a speaker. Went to YouTube, typed in like Billboard Top 100 or something, and it started playing all these songs. And I thought it was kind of strange because, I didn't recognize any of the songs. And in my lifetime, that's kind of the songs everybody knew. They were always on the radio or TV or whatever. And I was like, I haven't heard any of these on anything lately. And so as I was like kind of thinking about that, my 8-year old, she said, how do you know all the TikTok songs? I was like, what do you mean know all the TikTok songs? And and as I started to think about it, like, it's a generational thing. That's her generation is the TikTok generation. That's where they get their music and their pop music, their Billboard 100s, their MTV, their VH1. Like, the way that we collected music was through almost this osmosis of what was on TV or what was on our networks, or what you heard on the radio in passing. And now it almost seems like the radio songs are something separate from what the TikTok songs are, in a way, like what the generation is latching onto. So I'm not saying it in a negative way, because every generation communicates in a different way. Like, I wasn't like sitting there watching MTV all the time, but I did, at least in high school, I would wake up every morning and turn on MTV, and they would just have like this flow of videos. And some of it was just like pop garbage, and some of it was cool, and some of it I really liked. But ultimately that's kind of how I knew what was going on in the I guess like the mainstream at that time. Was every morning I would just kind of hear everything that everybody was listening to. And so I would kind of know as I navigated my day. But you know where I think MTV was kind of a generational marker for a lot of people, I feel like TikTok is kind of occupying that same space for a new generation. And that to me is it's really interesting. I like to observe history as it's being made. And so I probably put too much emphasis on everything that's happening in any given moment. But I've always kind of struggled with my memory, I guess. And so for me, like, I guess one of my biggest fears is like, I'm going to forget. People are gonna be like, you were there, why don't you remember history? Especially with like 2020, like everything that's going on. I just don't want to be caught in this future where it's like you were there and but you can't remember, and you can't like shed the truth on something. Like, I would hate in 20 years to hear like the sensationalized version of what happened with all the protests and everything. So as I'm seeing that and gathering that information, I'm also like desperately trying to remember it as well as possible, so that in the future it doesn't get morphed into something different from what it was. So I know that's a terrible trait, because it means I'm probably not really living in the moment. I'm not enjoying every moment for what it is. But I don't know. I've just seen so much history get kind of, for lack of a better term, whitewashed. And so that's like a big fear for me, is that in the future I'm not going to be able to remember how it actually was. I will remember the the whitewashed version of it all. So that's kind of how I look at all this stuff, and generational divides and the changes going on, but like always in a positive light. Like, I want to see it so I can prevent it from being perverted into that bad thing. That's kind of my approach to social media. Like, I think social media can be a good or a bad thing. It's a powerful tool or a deadly weapon. But being proactive about it and leaning into it and saying, like, let's shape this to be what we want it to be instead of reacting to what it becomes, you know? That's a big thing for me. I think that's why I'm so obsessed with keeping track of history so that I don't forget in the future when it all gets morphed into something else, you know? So, these are the things that occupy my mind all the time. Ridiculous. So, on to another interesting, like, nostalgia trip, I guess. My son got into Yu Yu Hakusho this week. He's been getting into anime. He's 12, so that crazy expression of emotions relates very well to teenagers. And that's cool because I went through the same thing. I loved anime for a while, and same thing. I guess it was just kind of relatable. But I guess what's interesting with his generation, like for me, I don't know if I would call myself like first generation anime. But like definitely probably like the second generation of it. So outside of looking back, there really wasn't a lot to bring your focus other than the shows and characters themselves, you know? But for him, he has like there's this long history before him. And so now there's stuff like Jump Force and Roblox. They have this like anime fighting game that he plays. And so he gets introduced to these characters and falls in love with them. And then he wants to find out about them. And so it's like a really interesting approach, very opposite of what my experience was, you know? So he's been playing as Yusuke and he really likes the character. So he wanted to watch the show. So he started watching Yu Yu Hakusho this week. And it's awesome to watch him get into it, but I also feel like his interest is waning because one thing I've noticed, like the pacing in that show is so slow. I mean, my memories of it must just be the end of the show when it was all like fights and tournaments and spirit guns and spirit shotguns and flaming swords and crazy ninjas and rose whips. Like what he's watched so far, he's been watching for like a week, and Yusuke still like floating around as a ghost trying to find his body. And so that's crazy to me because it as a kid it felt like all of that part went so quick so we could get to the good stuff. But rewatching it with him, I'm like, oh no, yeah, he's still flying around with I forget her name, but the ghost lady, and I think he just met uh Prince Karama for the first time and stuff. So there's a lot in that show I forgot about, but there's also just like crazy pacing issues with it, you know. I'm sure that's how everything was at the time. I doubt it was an outlier, but it just blows me away. Like within 2 or 3 episodes, they should have been able to wrap up his origin story and get us into him shooting stuff and being a spirit detective. What happened to that part? When does that show up? So yeah, that's kind of like my nostalgia trip of the week is just realizing like how poorly paced Yu Yu Hakusho is. And I also think it's kind of interesting because like I'm not familiar with Japanese storytelling revisiting characters the way we do in America, you know? We'll reboot it every like 5 to 10 years. We don't care. Whereas Japanese storytelling, I feel like like there's Naruto's son has a story or whatever going on now, but generally I feel like they don't really revisit the same things. Dragon Ball, it feels like that's just been going, It doesn't really feel like they went back to it, I guess. But obviously they have, but for the most part, on the whole, I feel like I rarely hear about Japanese storytelling revisiting the same characters. It seems like they try to tell the same stories with new characters, in new ways, I guess. But yeah, that was kind of my nostalgia trip of the week. It was just really crazy to me to see how my memory versus reality very different on that one. So still a good show, still great characters. I just wish it was like way faster and better paced. The conceit of the week. This week I didn't really write too much. I kind of some writer's block, I guess. I'm working through figuring out where the everything goes from here. Um, I know that in the end, John has to call Mac or contact him and try to get off the planet and get into the stars. But John is still standing on the cliff, and but John is still standing on the cliff, and I have to figure out how to nudge him and push him over the edge. He's gonna have to fall off the cliff and learn to fly. And so that's what I'm trying to figure out. I think there's a couple of options there. I think I wouldn't even call them hints, but there's definitely references to solitude and what is there so far in order to kind of present what it is that John values. And so that's kind of the selling point, is that there's solitude. There's nobody else out in space. Like, you're not going to get bothered. So is the thing that pushes him to the stars, is that having a bunch of people come by his house and harass him a lot? Because I don't hate that concept, but it sounds really drawn out, and I'm at the point in this where, like, I need to get into act 2, and having a bunch of people come around and annoy him just sounds like kind of dragging that out. I guess the other option would be to rewrite things so that Mac comes back like a lot of times and bothers him and chases him off into space, I guess. Um, the other option is, I feel like he already wants the solitude, but he doesn't want to give up his farm. And so I think there's also an option there to, like, do something to the farm, destroy it, or present it in a way that, like, it would be better for him to get rid of it anyway. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to figure out, is which path is the better path and which way I should go with that. Um I don't know. I guess now that I'm thinking about it, I kind of like the idea of having Mac come by a lot, and he's like always trying to avoid him until he eventually gives in, because that's very much a salesman tactic. You get like 5 no's before you accept a no, I guess. And yeah, it's really annoying. I hated having to learn about that kind of crap, but that's how they do. So it would almost make sense for Mac to come back a lot and bother him. At the same time, I want something a little more concrete. Destroying the farm means that we don't have to come back later. There's no reason to come back home. We can give John what he wants, and that's fulfilling. So those are the things I'm working through this week. A little bit shorter episode. Go back and listen to last week's episode, and give me some feedback on the dialogue there and the story, and where you think it would go from there, and what you would do different. Like I said, I think I have 2 options. So tell me what the third option is. You can find me on social media under New Guy on YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. NUEXGUY. Until next week, I'll keep the fire warm.